Welcome back, Ben Beard. Last time we talked, it was about Fright Night. And we're here to talk about something that may be equally as scary, which is the South on film, as written, as described in "The South Never Plays Itself." Brand new, and it's hardcover, right? This is my advanced reader copy. As we discussed last time, it's actually out of date because you added an entire new kind of closing piece to it about the
Yes.
Florida Project. So it is out by
It
the
comes
time
out
this.
December 15th. Sorry. It got delayed by a few weeks because of COVID
Oh,
printing delays. So it comes out December 15th.
December 15th. Okay, well then we'll have to like post date this, and
Sounds
everyone can read it. It'll be the perfect holiday gift. Uh,
sure.
no, that's great.
Yeah.
It's not that great. It's not great that it got delayed, and especially because of COVID. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised because A, it's 2020, and B, everything is being delayed because
Yeah,
of COVID.
for sure.
Oh, well, so first of all, let me just start by asking you how it feels that the book is actually coming out. It's done, it's off to the printers, even though those printers are
Yeah.
delayed. Tell me about it. How does it feel?
It feels good. I mean, I've been working on this I worked on it for maybe 6 years, writing, researching at lunchtime, at night, um, early in the mornings, because I have a full-time job. And then I turned it in, and then because it was 650 pages, the first draft. It was getting bigger and bigger, and I kept coming across new films, important movies, right? Every movie seemed to be the key to some aspect, and I was like a goldfish in a giant pond. I was just getting bigger and bigger. So I added a couple. I tried to keep it fresh and up to date, so I was adding pieces here and there, but it feels amazing. It's weird because I've been out of the writing game, the publishing game, for a while. So now I'm back, and I mean, it's so far it's been great. I've gotten some reviews. I got to talk to you and meet you, and I feel good about it. I feel vulnerable, and exposed, um, but I'm happy.
Is part of that vulnerability and exposure the fact that this is not just a list of movies about the South or that take place in the South. It is part memoir, part political philosophy, wrapped up in the context of the films that you kind of the sort of defined your life, and also, not just your early development and understanding of the world, but as you've continued to evolve, uh, continues to inform the way that you view things. I think a lot of what everyone has grown up, at least in America, is seen through the lens of pop culture, which is something I want to get into later because the title of the book is "The South Never Plays Itself." Now, can you explain what you mean by that title?
I can. Let me say why I feel exposed just quickly. I just feel there's so many ways. The concept of the book is a really good one, right? Like the mythology and history of the South and the movies, like at the same time. I knew that, but I have, because I'm eccentric, I have like structured it in kind of a weird way, and I also have marveled in some anecdotes and my own political awakening, my own aesthetic development. And so I feel it is a personal book, right? But I like film criticism and writing about the movies that like kind of captures what it feels like when you're watching the film itself. I love that. So I mean, I was trying to kind of marble into it some of my own passion for movies and my enthusiasm, but I can be over enthusiastic. So anyway, I just feel I feel like I've said a lot about myself, and it just feels weird. I don't know. So the title, actually, did you ever see the Los Angeles Plays Itself? This great documentary by Tom Anderson. I think his name's Tom Anderson. So he made this documentary, and it's all film clips from movies set in Los Angeles, and he's just narrating over these film clips. And to me, it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And I was watching this, and what he does in that film more succinctly and better than I mean, he's commenting on different facets of the movies in Los Angeles, right? But I thought the South is often portrayed on screen so vastly different from my experience of living down there. And so, and that's changed a little bit recently, but the kind of plantations and magnolia trees and like everyone's a farmer and no one know and everyone's like undereducated or so dire, so poor, like that just wasn't the South that I grew up in. And so, you know, I was started to kind of think like, well, I grew up here. Why do I have this tension about my own, you know, home state, the city where I live? Like, why do I see it one way and the pop culture seems to see it another? And so that like, there was some tension there, and that's kind of where the title, also the title I just thought was kind of catchy, but
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are like a lot of New York films that actually captured New York quite well, I think. I don't live there, but I've been there. But I think there are a couple films that have captured some of the contradictions and complexities of the South, right? But I say this in the book, the South is a real place. It's a vast place with like all these different cities and states and dialects, but it's also an idea. And so the idea is like stronger than reality in a way. Yeah.
Now, is that what, if you could summarize, what is that idea and is the way that you see it? And how have the films that have, name a handful of the films that have spoken the truest of this idea as you conceive it?
So you have different facets of the myth. You have the I don't call it the mythological South, but you have the kind of pre-lapsarian, pre-Civil War Eden, right? Which, by the way, I don't think that. Obviously, all the enslaved people is the worst place to live in the world. But you have this kind of, it never existed, but you have this genteel, almost like courtly sort of place, right? That is unmarred by industry, and you get a whole bunch of movies about that era, right? It's not just Gone with the Wind. There's so many films. There was a whole genre of like plantation films especially from the 30s. I had those in an earlier draft, but they just didn't quite fit in the book. But there are a lot of those, you know. And then you have this idea of the South as just a place of just terrible violence. You got Easy Rider, you have Deliverance, which, by the way, I love Deliverance. I think it's a great film. It's utter bullshit, right? It's a great movie. It's a complete, like, the idea that people saw that and was like, man, that's the South, right? Is crazy. I've been lost in the South. No one like attacked me. No one tried to rape me. Like, you know, I've been lost in like the hinterlands. People are friendly. You know, I mean, you know, hey, I don't know where I'm going. Anyway, so there are a number of other facets of this, right? But like, I would say the South is a place of great violence, right? I mean, I live in Chicago, right? I mean, it's ridiculous to like consider the South a place of great violence, right? When Chicago has this just astonishing murder rate, right?
Yeah. Now, when you say that, are you talking about presently or historically or both?
Well, historically, but like the South had racial violence. I mean, like the racism of the South is real. It's horrible, and it should be explored on film, right? But that's not what Easy Rider and Deliverance are doing. And there's a whole bunch of these. There's Trapped, 2000 Maniacs. I mean, there's so many. We've seen so many, right? I call them these kind of rural Morlock films. It's like these almost like they're almost vampiric. They're so poor they almost speak another language, right? And they just exist to like gobble up city dwellers who wander into their domain.
In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's literally true.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Which I love that movie, but that movie's a little bit different because it like connects their cannibalism to like they worked at the meat factory. That movie's really intriguing. You know, we could talk for an hour about Texas Chainsaw, but yeah, same kind of thing, right? So like that, obviously it's supposed to represent the historical violence, right? But that's not what those movies are doing. Easy Rider doesn't tap into lynching. It doesn't tap into, I mean, those rednecks that killed Jack Nicholson around the fire. I mean, they're supposed to be emblematic, I guess, but when they just shotgun the two guys on the side of the road, like that's, I don't even know where to begin to talk about that, right? I don't see how it connects to any of the actual racial violence or lynching or any of that stuff. So, uh, anyway,
Well,
those are just, go ahead.
I was gonna
Sorry.
say it's interesting because never really thought about that until just talking to you about this. Because the movies that you're talking about feature largely white on white violence, but
Sure.
they are this sort of counterculture. I'll call them northern attitudes, even though you look at, California, which is literally a southern state, but
Sure.
it's kind of like this enclave of, we'll call them northern values, northern progressivism that are intruding on what you might call this, sort of that pre-Civil War plantation South, and we don't want those new ideas.
Right.
The Civil War is fought for reasons. One of the big ones was slavery, but in terms of the movies we're talking about, it's not necessarily that they have to have black people in them being oppressed to represent that sort of the northern, I guess, or sort of a hardcore American ideal of equality under the law. It's just, you could almost interpret Fonda and Hopper getting gunned down, or Nicholson getting beaten to death, on a campfire, to represent those lynchings. Even though they're white people, there is something emblematic to this idea of people living on equal footing that some folks just didn't want to accept.
Sure, but like Hopper and Fonda are drug running. I mean, they're like, and I know they're supposed to be the heroes, but they're carrying, harmful narcotics across the country. And I know each scene has its own weight, right? And its own kind of like what's going on in the scene. They go to that commune, which I always found to be like a great but really kind of disturbing scene when they were at the hippie place, and they're everyone's kind of confused and tense. But yeah, obviously the violence does. I think the people who made Easy Rider were trying to tap into Vietnam, like racial oppression, and all of that. I'm not sure they're succeeding, is what I'm saying. And on a literal level, it's just a lie that you're going to bike or drive around in Tennessee or Alabama and someone's just going to shoot you on the side of the road. Even back then. Now, yes, Viala Leozo, I'm mispronouncing her name, right? Driving to Selma, picking up the civil rights people. She got shotgunned in her car. You had Vernon Jordan got shot, right? I mean, you had a lot of civil rights people getting shot in the South. So I'm not, that's not the argument I'm making. I'm just saying that like Easy Rider like fully saturated the cultural consciousness, right?
Yeah.
To a point that like it's almost not a problem, but it's like everyone, like when my wife moved to Atlanta, her dad, who's from around here, said like he referenced Easy Rider, like don't move down there, don't move down there. They shoot like Northerners down there.
It's odd. I don't think I've ever heard someone reference Easy Rider when they're talking about going to the South. It's usually Deliverance or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those
Sure.
really scary, woodsy people types.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I mean, yeah, that could be an entirely different, possibly even an entire book about the social slash race consciousness or lack thereof of Easy Rider.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a lot more about it in the earlier draft because I the backstory of that movie is so fascinating, right?
Well,
Um,
what we do get in there, the sort of behind the scenes with Hopper and Fonda, I think I'd forgotten that there was some tension, but I didn't. Some of the anecdotes you have in there, I didn't realize it was that bad. Jesus.
my favorite one is that Rip Torn was in the movie first, and Dennis Hopper, like the first day of filming, had a gun and had everyone in a hotel lobby of New Orleans. This is true, and said, "This is my fucking movie. This is my fucking movie." Right? He's got a gun, and he knew karate. Like he was like a karate guy. I didn't know that, but he and Rip Torn they had a fight in a restaurant, and Rip Torn was in the military, and Rip Torn like they had knives out, and Rip Torn was like, "I'm going to meet you in the I'm going to stab you in the parking lot," and went out there, and Dennis Hopper like went out a side door and left. But yeah, it's that movie's crazy, right? But this is why you don't give all of your equipment and trust to like drugged out, crazy people without some control. Because like those early scenes that Dennis Hopper shot, they're beautiful in their way because they give unfiltered New Orleans. Sorry, those dogs bark.
All
Which
right.
is awesome, right? You get like New Orleans, like that. Those scenes in New Orleans are amazing, right? You get a glimpse of what New Orleans was actually like, right? Just walking around. But there's no movie there, you know. Anyway,
Yeah, it's also weird thinking about Dennis Hopper too, because flash back to, what was it, 10, 15 years earlier, and he's like the third guy from the back behind James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause, like the clean cut,
oh yeah,
quiet
and
guy. And
he's in Giant. He's like the good. He's sort of a good son in Giant, and like it's so weird that these great directors, George Stevens and Nicholas Ray, didn't see the wild man like lurking in the background there. But I heard though that he met James Dean on Giant, and he adopted the actor, the like methody thing, and basically became an asshole on the set of Giant. That's what I read that book on the movie, the film, The Making of Giant, and in it, the author says basically like that's what happened to Dennis Hopper. Like he like was like, nah, man, he just kind of absorbed James Dean because James Dean was horrible. I mean, I know movies try to make him like a nice guy.
well, that's the other thing. I kind of was like reading breezily through, and then the brakes screeched to a halt, and like, wait, James Dean was terrible. This is the first time I've really, I mostly know the iconography, and I've seen,
Well,
the 3 movies he did, and I think he's
he was
awesome on screen.
tortured. Yeah, he was tortured. That if you're going to be generous, he was tortured,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And
I don't.
talented.
Yeah.
He would he would get mad and just unzip his pants and urinate in front of people, like just to be crazy and to like be dominant. And on the movies about him, there was that one that came out, it was okay, but he's seen as this real sensitive guy, but he was a creep. He drove around. He liked making people be scared. He would bomb around the city. People would drive in the car with him and get out and they'd be like shaking. They'd be like, I'm never doing that again. I think Nicholas Ray said that, like, I'm never riding with you in the car again. Anyway.
That's just crazy to me. And again, talking about the mythology of the movies and presenting this great package, because this guy is on, he's a walking nostalgia bomb. Well,
Sure.
he's not walking anymore, but yeah, you don't get that.
He's in 3 great films, right? And so, like, I think Giant is a masterpiece. It's an epic movie. It's hard for it to be artful. I think Giant's like amazing. I think it's a great film. I think it has a great story to tell. I think George Stevens is like, when he's on, he's really one of the great ones. And so he's and he looks like a 45-year-old man. He moves like an old man at the end of that film, or not old, because I'm almost that old. But he moves like an older guy, right? And then obviously he was in East of Eden, and he's the weakest part of that film, honestly.
Yeah, I watched the 3 Dean films all in one night.
Whoa.
Back in art school. Yeah, it was a long night because I wanted to impress a girl who was a big James Dean fan.
Oh, okay. That's good motivation.
Yeah. It worked out for a while anyway. But and the benefit of it, I learned about, I got to finally appreciate James Dean films. But let me ask you something about the research that you put into this.
Sure.
Because it's what I love about, especially the early part of the book, is it's not just about films, but it's also about authors, like Faulkner and Tennessee Williams.
Oh yeah, I'm
and
proud
Flannery
of those
O'Connor.
chapters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I read all the time. This is like a weird. I'm not going to say this to anyone else. Okay, who I talk to. I wrote another book simultaneously next to this one, and it was American fiction from 1950 to the present day. I haven't published it or anything. I mean, I'm sitting on it. Hopefully someone will want to publish it. And it's the National Book Award winner from every year. Okay. So I read all the time, and I read a bunch of Faulkner novels for that. And the two like merged, right? I was like, oh, I didn't realize Faulkner had such a screen career that he did. I also didn't realize that as many adaptations were made of his films and books as really are. which are crazy because his books are like internal and strange and out of order, and they're everything Hollywood hates, except they're prestigious, right? And that Hollywood loves prestige. So anyway, I said, okay, Faulkner's like who created the South, our concept of the South in the 20th century. Faulkner's one of the main guys, right? And the movie adaptations are part of it. So I wrote, and the chapter was longer, but I have like it's almost its own book. It's Faulkner's career in Hollywood, his novels, the adaptations, and then his life, and how his life impacted his work. And he's a really weird guy because you can't really see his life and his work very well at all. Like he like puts to bed that whole thing that writers write what they know. I mean, he writes about the South, but there's no, like, he didn't have the experiences that he's writing about, except he drank all the time. But so there's a real narrative to that and an arc to that chapter, right? The chapter about Faulkner. And I marble in there Erskine Caldwell, who's a terrible knockoff, but they made a couple of good films, especially God's Little Acre, from his work. So what does Faulkner give us, right? He gives us these depraved, because they are so poor, denizen, like survivors of the Civil War or right after the Civil War, roaming around trying to make a living in this new reality. And they're often racist, they're often drunks, they're often very cruel and mean. And he has them flush up against like landed gentry and wealthy Southerners. And he has this kind of like ping pong thing that happens in his books. And I think that and in the adaptations, and you know, a lot of those films are pretty damn good. And so then from there, and he really dominates the 40s in a weird kind of way. And then the 50s is what you're talking about. Tennessee Williams appears, and Tennessee Williams like owned that decade. I had no idea how many huge films come from Tennessee Williams plays. And everyone sees Streetcar at some point, but he did the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which is like a perfect film. My favorite's The Fugitive Kind, which no one even sees. No one even knows. Sidney Lumet directed it. No one even knows this movie. It's amazing. It's got Marlon Brando, and it's Tennessee Williams. It's like everyone's has desires that are often unmet, and their desires are driving people insane. And it's hot and sexy, and there's lots of drinking, and everyone is like verbally acute, right? Everyone can like really lay it down verbally. And he gives us another South that we still have today. I feel like a lot of films, especially kind of anything that's like noirish in the South, I feel like it's coming straight from Tennessee Williams. It's like it's just the heat and the languor. And I wrote it, it didn't make it into the book, but Body Heat, I had a whole thing on Body Heat, that William Hurt. Have you seen that movie?
No.
It's really good, but it's like a noir. Anyway, so those chapters, and then the Flannery O'Connor, I have a chapter on Southern religion and the KKK, which is, I'm maybe being a little provocative and bitchy, putting them in the same chapter. But Flannery O'Connor is a formative, figure for me. Her short stories are astonishing. Her novel, Wise Blood, just knock you on your ass. And the movie is really damn good. John Huston directed it, and Brad Dourif plays the guy who preaches the church with no Christ. And it has him wandering around. I think it was filmed in Macon, but he's wandering around this kind of kind of urban, small city. And he runs into these other pastors and sort of parasitic hangers on. It's really good.
Well, that is one thing that I picked up from reading the book. I love that you break down all of the films and even the novels that you talk about, because one of the things you're doing is, for someone like me who has embarrassingly not seen a lot of the movies that are in this book, it's kind of like my bucket list. Like, I should have seen Streetcar by now. I've never seen Gone with the Wind. Like the big ones that are just these gaps in my knowledge. I'm like, you are describing them to me without spoiling things. I still feel like I need to see them.
Yeah,
but you're
I don't want to
talking
spoil
about
anything.
Right, but you're talking about why they're important, what they mean in the context of this kind of narrative that you're telling about the South,
Yeah.
and it's fascinating stuff. But it's like a 268-page checklist in a
Well, it's
good way.
supposed to be fun,
It
right? The
is
book
fun,
was
yes.
supposed to, so like, let me say, if it's not fun to read, I've like failed miserably because I did set out to write a book that I would want to read, right? And I don't, I mean, I will read complex works, right? But I did not want this to be homework, right? I wanted it to be fresh and have surprises and stuff. So yeah, and like, you know, I started watching movies, I would say serious. I watched them all the time as a kid. I mean, all the time, probably like you, but it was scattershot. It was what's on TV. I'd watch like Lethal Weapon movies with my dad. And it was really, I started watching gangster films. I want to say when I was 17 with a neighbor. And from that, I mean, I was watching Ingmar Bergman at like 19. I mean, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I watched Hour of the Wolf, which scared the shit out of me. Seventh Seal when I was like 20 years old, you know? So I got lucky. I don't really know how it happened. I watched like Fellini. I was living in Montgomery, Alabama, and I rented 8.5 from Blockbuster, right? Like I didn't know, and I was the only one I knew really at the time who was like into the history of movies, if that
Well,
makes
that's
sense.
yeah. I mean, this is where my prejudice comes in. I'm surprised that there's an Alabama and Blockbuster in the '90s that carried Fellini.
It might have been a library. It might have been the library. It was VHS. Yeah. Yeah. It might have, now that I think about it, it might have been a library. I remember though, I watched it at 22 and the guy floats out of the fucking car and he's like on the kite string on the beach. And I was like, I mean, my mouth was open. I was like, I can't believe what I'm watching here. This is like the best film I've ever seen. And I didn't understand it, but anyway, so like, let me say, I scoured books. I read tons of lists online to try to find like, I did want it to be the first and last kind of state. I mean, that's arrogance, but I wanted it to be like a deep statement about it, right? And like, I wanted to make sure I did my homework. So it took me years, but I have a good memory. I've been watching movies. I say this in the book, but I lived in Iowa City with my wife, and she was in grad school, and together we were making like $20,000 a year. I didn't have any money. I didn't know anybody, so I would just get movies at a library while she was doing research and studying and grading papers and stuff. I would watch movies. I watched one movie a night for 2 years, and I already knew more about. I'd already seen more movies than anyone I know. It was like 700 films or something, some crazy, and it was all good stuff. It was like Tarkovsky, more Bergman, Howard Hawks, classic Hollywood stuff. And it was like falling back in love.
Was this when you were reviewing movies as well? Because I know you don't get really, I don't think, into it in the book, but you do talk about how you spent some time as a film critic, and at one point you interviewed Denzel Washington, which
Man
that
on
sounds
Fire.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was a round table. All right. So I was writing for Inside Magazine, which I don't think is around anymore, in Atlanta, and they would set up, and I kind of fell into it, and I was reviewing movies for a free paper in Montgomery, Alabama, and outside Alabama, and I mean outside Montgomery, and they would set up screenings for new movies, and I just would go in the morning. I had a job that worked at night. I'd go in the morning, watch new movies in an empty theater with myself. I was a fucking king, right? It was the greatest thing. So then they started setting me up to interview people for junkets and stuff. So I interviewed Viggo Mortensen one-on-one. He's a nice guy, very quiet. I mean, like, see, he talks, and I did Kevin Costner. I talked to Kevin Costner one-on-one, which, Neil LaBute, which was really interesting. He was biting and a little too quick-witted and sarcastic for me. But I also, Denzel Washington, and the thing about him, it was at a round table for Man on Fire. His voice like shakes the windows, man. His voice is so powerful. And I didn't realize I started to think about the films. I was like, oh yeah, his voice is actually really powerful. But in person, I was like, whoa, blown away.
So it's not just the Dolby surround sound that does it. It's just
No,
him.
he is the loudest besides my 11-year-old daughter, he's the loudest person. For her, like his regular talking voice, the loudest I've ever seen, but impressively loud. It was like, you know, he's awesome. I mean, yeah. But yeah. So anyway, I reviewed, and I got flown out, and I was 25, and this was like amazing. I got flown out to LA sometimes. They're trying to seduce you into giving them good reviews.
Oh, sure.
I got flown to New Orleans for Runaway Jury. That was really cool. And to New York a couple of times. So I maybe reviewed 60, 70 maybe 60 films in a year and a half, 2 years. And I met some interesting people. I met Richard Zanuck. That was really special for me. Yeah, I mean, I'd be a much better interviewer now, frankly. I was often kind of like, I was impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I one thing that I learned about you from writing this book is that we are the same age. We were both born in 1977.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, back in the early 2000s, I was writing for a comic book reviewing website. So I was reviewing comics, and same thing, going to conventions and interviewing, like, artists and writers, also like media celebrities, like people from Smallville would show up and I'd talk to them and things. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. When you're young and enthusiastic, like, oh my God, I'm talking to a famous person and writing down what they say, and people are going to read it. And then you get older and, not necessarily more cynical, but perhaps a little bit more professional. You can kind of, adjust
I'm more
yourself accordingly.
self-confident, right? I have my own stuff now that I try to do, right? By the way, I love comic books. I've been reading comics since I was a little kid. So another time we should talk about that. But
oh yeah,
I'll say, like, here's an example. I meet Kevin Costner, right? And I know I kind of did my homework. All right. But I stepped in it right away.
Oh,
because I said something about, like, Waterworld, like, it's actually a really impressive movie. I don't know why the critics didn't like it. And he goes, "What are you talking about?" Just like that. Yeah. I'm in a hotel room, and I was like, well, some people thought it was too long. Like, that's kind of how I literally said that, right? We got through it, and there's that's not really germane to the book, but I have a funny Kevin Costner anecdote. But anyway, so I reviewed films, and I was getting better at it. I mean, I don't know if I'm a stronger writer now than I was then. I'm sort of intuitive. I like just go for it,
Well, and that's something that I think comes across in the book. It is, one of the things I like to see in film criticism is a voice, when I can get a sense of who the person is, what their personality is like, without having to read everything that they've ever written.
Me
and
too.
I don't like reading the stolid kind of, like, almost like AP style review, where it's like, here's what happened, this is good or this is bad. So that does come across in the book. Now, one question I have is, when you were watching all those movies, forever ago, were some of those movies that you ended up watching again for the book? And if so, couple of things: how had they changed in your estimation? And B, when you're watching all the films for the book, and I don't know how easy this is going to be to answer, when you know that you've got sort of a premise for a book about film, does that shade the way that you watch the movies or think about them, or even remember, misremember things, or shade the way that you appreciated them when you were younger?
Let me start with the second part of that question.
Okay.
Like the shading. The Searcher is, like everybody, is like a big film for me, except I don't like the homesteading part. I see why it's in the movie, but, like, I always feel like, this is slow. But, like, Ethan Edwards pursuing this kidnapped niece, and he's going to kill her if she is having intercourse with the American Indians who kidnapped her, right? He's going to kill her if she's become
tainted,
right?
Yeah.
And he pursues her to the point of ego dissolution. He's becomes just a killing machine. His life is pointless except for this one racially motivated thing. He's a Confederate, like, he's a former Confederate soldier, and so that film animated this whole, I started realizing like, man, there's a lot of Confederate Avengers and like Confederate heroes. And what the fuck is going on with that? Because they're not like they're not the heroes. They may not be all the soldiers aren't the villains necessarily, but they are not the heroes. So what's going on, right? You got the outlaw Josie Wales. You have Run of the Arrow, which no one knows about. It's a tiny little movie with Rod Steiger. But you have Vera Cruz, Gary Cooper, and Vera Cruz is this kind of like poetic gunman who fought for the South because he's a dreamer. Which I was like in the Yankee mercenaries, like Kirk Douglas, they're like these nasty dudes, right? So yes, that that Confederate Avenger kind of character and sort of what does it mean? And Outlaw Josie Wales is like the big one, right? But what is it like? Where did it come from? That informed how I was watching some of these films, especially westerns. I started looking into westerns. I love westerns, and I was like, who are the Confederates, and what who's the hero of this story, right? So that the Searchers is like as powerful now as it was then, maybe more so, because we still have this like race madness and obsession. And so I mean, I saw that movie as a kid, and I just thought John Wayne was shooting people. All right. So did I misremember films was part of your question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I wrote an essay a long time ago about how I had misremembered Salvador, the Oliver Stone film. This isn't in the book. And I thought that Belushi was killed in a bar fight. And I saw this at 10 years old, and it haunted I was really upset in my childhood. So I rewatched it 5-6 years ago, and Belushi does not get killed in the movie. He does not get killed in a bar fight. And this like haunted childhood thing just didn't happen. And I was really upset by this, right? This is that whole, I think they call it the Mandela effect, like reality like warped behind me or something. Yeah, I came across this a lot, right? I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, sometimes films were richer than I remembered, especially some of the older films. But I have a much larger appetite for them now than when I was a kid. Some of them were just as terrible as I remembered, but I try not to like just skip. Just because a movie's bad doesn't mean it doesn't have something to say, right? Or like doesn't have power. Gone with the Wind is a fascinating film because it's a fixed object, right? And that movie's meaning and afterlife like it's like as powerful now as it was, and it's way more controversial now. And the backstory, I mean, HBO Max pulls it for 1 week and people like lose their shit, right? To put that like little introduction on it. And so I think what your question is, that was a kind of a complicated question. So I think I'm just talking around your question. No. It was a good one. I think I'm talking around your question. But like the idea, like the films don't change. The films themselves do not change, but society changes and we change. And part of the reason we change is that we watch those films. And so what ends up happening is like these movies have this outsized role in our lives. And some of them motivate us racially for good and bad, right? Some of them haunt us, right? And I'm gonna come to a film in a second. Some of them ruin us, right? I mean, honestly, some of them like really fuck us up. They're powerful, and this is why. This is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I did have a unique, well, not fully unique, but I had a position that not everyone has, which is like a movie lover, former Southerner, and inculcated in the like war between the states mentality. And so I think I have enough distance to like explore some of that, right?
And
And so,
also
yeah, go
a
ahead.
religious conservative background. You kind of had this
Yes,
conversion at some point in your life.
yes, that was that's yes, I was a very religious kid, and I went to Southern Baptist, First Baptist, and then East Brent Baptist in Pensacola, Florida. Um, every Sunday and every Wednesday, and I went to some revivals and stuff. And I went to a Christian school, and it was only going to a Catholic high school where there was some. It was comic books and Catholic high school that like put some chinks in the Christian armor that I wore. Um, but yeah, so one of the major controversial films right now, and always really since the 80s, has been Song of the South, right? Which Disney has hidden. Is no DVD release, no Blu-ray release.
No
You
Disney
can
Plus.
no Disney Plus. You can get it if you get the Japanese DVD because they have different copyright laws. So it's like basically you can get a Japanese like knockoff. It's really hard to find online. I'm sure I could have explored and found it, but this was a seminal film of my childhood. We watched Disney was an area that my mom and dad, it was a safe space, right? So here's my dad, like, let's have fun. Here's my mom, like, Jesus saves. And like the spot in the middle, and I'm honestly not mocking my mom. I don't think she'll hear this, but I'm not mocking. But that the safe space was Disney, which is weird, but Disney. So when I was a kid, the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Old Yeller, The Great Train Robbery, which is like a Civil War movie, which is weird. But anyway, and Song of the South, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But these movies run all the time. So I've seen Song of the South like 40 times. And my sister and I went, she swears, I only have a vague memory of it. In 1986, we went to the re-release, the theatrical re-release in Louisiana when we were visiting my mom's parents. So this film, I didn't realize it was a big deal. I didn't realize that people like argued about it. I didn't until I started writing this book. I just didn't even. This was like in the deep recesses of my mind, and then I heard the You Must Remember This 10 episode podcast on it, and I was like, oh, holy shit, man! Song of the South's like a hot deal. It's like a big deal, and so I have a little. I don't have a whole lot about it, but it's in that 1940s, that early. 30s, 40s, early kind of race picture in the book.
Yeah.
But this movie has a ton of power. It's absolutely not racist at all, and it's one of the most racist films ever made. And the reason that have you seen it?
No, well, and we're kind of getting to the point of it, which is, by the time I was aware of it, really, um, it was already kind of taboo and not in circulation. Now, I think maybe at like comic book conventions, people, you always had the
Yeah,
guys with like the big boxes of bootleg VHSs that you could buy.
sure.
I probably could have picked it up there, but I just never did because I figured at some point I'll see it. But no, I have not seen it.
Well, so quickly, it has Walt Disney. It was his baby. He tried to hire Walter Bernstein, who was a left-wing writer, to write it, and said, "Look, I don't want to make an anti-black movie." Right? Bernstein was like, I don't remember exactly why it fell apart, but he was basically like, "I don't want anything to do with this." And then he hired Maurice Raff, who was a left-wing writer, and said, like, I don't want a Southern slant to this. I want the black characters to have dignity. He didn't use those words. I want them to have dignity. I want them, right? So the result, though, is it's in Reconstruction, but it's set in like, it could be during slavery, right?
Hmm.
So this is part of the problem. The power dynamics have been so scrubbed clean, you don't know who, you don't get any sense of like the former oppression, the violence, the hardship. You just don't get any of that. Instead, you have this nice relationship between this old man who's clearly a former enslaved person, and a young white kid. And he tells him these stories, the Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear and Brer Fox stories, with the animated sequences. and the actor's great. I mean, what's weird is if you watch the clips online, I mean, he's only 42 when they filmed it. Yeah.
The guy who played Uncle, is it Uncle Remus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. He was only
42.
42.
Yes.
Jesus.
I'm sorry to tell you that, Ian. He was younger than we are.
I'm glad I'm in a basement because I'd find the nearest bridge.
So anyway, the film, if you read the comments on like IMDb or YouTube or whatever, which I did for this, you know, people defend this book to the all the way. I mean, this movie all the way, but they also then other attack it all the way, right? And so the film's really strange because it is a very racist film, right? And it's also like in some compared to like Birth of a Nation or Peter Pan or like it's like a lot less racist than a lot of films.
Well, and this is something that I had an experience with. I think it was last year when Tim Burton's Dumbo came out. And I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't see I like the cartoon. I haven't seen the new one yet.
Okay, don't. It's an abomination.
Thank you.
Aside from
you saved me some time there.
Look up any of the clips online with just Eva Green. She's always, great. She gets some cool acrobatics, but everything else is just garbage. But in preparation for that, I realized, going with the theme of a bunch of movies I haven't seen yet, I watched the original Dumbo. I actually talked about it I was on another podcast. And I had heard all the stories growing up about how there are these black crow characters at the end. And, Dumbo is in some part a horribly racist movie. And then I watched the film and I realized that the characters, they might be a little bit problematic, but all of the characters in that movie are stereotypes of some kind, from the New York accented mouse to like all the other supporting characters. They all have some kind of a weird accent or a deal going on, but the crow characters are supporting Dumbo. They help give him the confidence that he needs to actually fly. They believe in him. They're positive characters. So I have not seen Song of the South, but I wonder how much of the controversy is, if what you're saying is it's sort of a timeless, they don't talk about the former oppression and slavery and all that. It's just a black character having a relationship with a young white boy and teaching him lessons. It almost seems like it could be released today as almost like a post-racial fable. Like if you take that context out of it, it's just,
It could. I mean, I have to be careful because I've seen it 30, 40 times, but all in my childhood. And I only got to see a few clips, like as an adult.
You don't want to Belushi this thing.
I don't want to Belushi this thing. And I also just don't like, it is problematic, right? Like the black characters are kind of, they're simpleton. I mean, it's disturbing, right? Now let me say about that. When I See an Elephant Fly, great song. It's disturbing. The iconography. I think the crows have names like Jim Crow and another one's name. I mean, it's a disturbing scene. Now, there are much worse movies and depictions.
Yeah.
But anyway, Song of the South. I mean, part of the reason it has so much power is that Disney's hidden it. Let's be honest, right? They're afraid. And so they've given this movie power that really it doesn't deserve.
And that's kind of what I wanted to get at, because you talked about Gone with the Wind being pulled for a week and then having this disclaimer put in front of it. I mean, one of the complications here is that, we don't really know each other that well, because this is the second time we've actually talked to each other. But I grew up, I'm a biracial kid. My dad was black and my mom was white. And so we grew up with, race conversations in the house, but a lot of it was not this kind of heightened conversation that's been happening the last couple of decades. In a lot of ways, it seems like the perception is that society has gone backwards. And I kind of understand that, but I feel like if I'd watched Song of the South when I was, 8 or 9 years old, it wouldn't have been a big deal to me. And my dad certainly would have not sheltered it from me. I don't even know if it would have been a conversation. He'd be like, yeah, there's a black guy singing to a white kid. That's, it's a cartoon.
I mean, like this is like awkward. They're like, some of these films are awkward to talk about because they're underlying tensions that are unresolved, right? In some sense. are there and they're playing out in the film. And like for me, Hollywood, the weirdest thing about Hollywood, classic Hollywood, is that they were Jewish immigrants who had, and to a guy, were raised really poor and had like fled oppression and violence.
Yeah.
And they didn't make a film about anti-Semitism until like 1949, or I think Crossfire is the first film I could think of. A great movie, but that like addresses anti-Semitism directly. Like that's the plot, right? And they sided with the South on screen for the most part, for ticket sales, right? And they were afraid they would cut out the Black characters. I learned this in the book, right? They would cut out Black performances, Black characters in the Southern circuits when they would tour their films, distribute their films, if they thought it was gonna like not be popular, basically, or like that it was gonna hurt the film. And I was astonished by this. And so like, in Georgia, if there was a film with Lena Horne singing to some white dude, right, like that, or like they would cut that out of the film. And so, to me, the movies, I'm not a believer. I mean, I'm a left wing guy. Like I want. I think people should talk about race constructively. They should try to like white people especially should like listen to Black artists and try to like look at our country, and try to make sense of it, right? And I'm trying to do this in the book a little bit. I have a whole chapter on Black cinema at the end, and I mean, I was uncomfortable starting out on it because I was like, why am I like, I don't, anyway. So the movies though, like you're seeing in the absence of these stories, you're seeing a lot of the problems in our country because the other characters aren't really there at a lot of the times. I mean, to your point, Song of the South, one of the reasons it should be shown is it has Hattie McDaniel and James Baskett. It has more than one Black character in a movie from the 40s, which is like, I mean, even now, right? If it's not a Black movie, even now, like oftentimes there'll be one Black character or one Latino character or like, so I mean, I agree. I don't believe in like purity tests. I don't believe in like, I don't think art should always, art shouldn't always agree with me. I don't want to agree with the political or aesthetic or moral point of view of every movie I see. But, right, like historically oppressed and marginalized people, I also don't want to contribute to their continued oppression and marginalization. You know what I mean? Like when I'm interacting with movies.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I guess my question is, and it's part of the national conversation that everybody's continuing to have, is how much of that is a genuine sort of, I'm going to fumble my words here, an earned recognition of a problem versus an assumption that everybody feels oppressed and
Oh
systemically
yeah.
weighed down today.
No, I mean, no, I agree. Like, I don't think anyone, I don't think anyone should, I don't think anyone benefits from like seeing themselves as a victim. And I don't think anyone benefits from, like, I think it's a loser for white people to just be like, oh, I've just oppressed so many people in my life, because yes. I just don't, like, that's not how we go through the world, but I think we, like, I mean, to use a buzzword, like white privilege is there all the time. And it is something that, I think has to be acknowledged anyway. But I honestly didn't set out to like, I didn't put Song of the South in the book to pontificate about it. I mean, my point initially, I probably come off as more strident as a writer than I am in person, but Birth of a Nation is studied. It actually killed people. It like actually killed people, right? The KKK reformed after the movie's popularity. Everyone watches that movie. Every film student, and like, if that's everywhere, like, who cares if Song of the South is like, if people watch it or not? Yeah.
Yeah, it's there are different categories. I like the way that you phrase that Birth of a Nation killed people, because it does show the impact of popular culture, especially back in the time when it was released. You didn't have multiplexes and movies coming out like by the dozen each week. Not that we have that today, really, but
Well,
pre-COVID.
yeah. Right.
So it was much easier to have something like not only capture the popular imagination, but help define the way that we think about certain things. And I think that was one
Sure.
of the fascinations of reading the book, is the idea of how much, I think you said this earlier, how much certain movies and certain writers of movies like Tennessee Williams help to define what a culture is in the popular imagination and how that reverberates. I wonder what kind of, I guess, damage that does.
I
Like,
mean, a lot,
yeah,
like a lot, but the damage is hand in hand with the benefits. I mean, it's the power movies have, right? They're like part myth, they're part reflection of what's going on, they're part dream, they're part nightmare, and they're like art and commerce like mixed together, and they're even bad films are profoundly powerful, right? And so in the aggregate, I mean, they've given us a lot of Souths, right? But in the aggregate, I think a lot of the misunderstandings about the South. I'll do a point, right? Like, I've lived in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, okay, and my mom grew up in Louisiana, and I went to Louisiana a lot, okay. I'm not going to speak to Louisiana as much but like Florida, Alabama, Georgia, especially Georgia, like, race relations in Georgia, in Atlanta, are light years ahead of the race relations in Chicago. Light years. There's so much less tension. People actually hang out. Like, it's not like you just having to work with somebody or something, like, and it's less segregated. But yet, right? If you said Illinois and Georgia, right? Everyone is going to be like, oh, Georgia's way more racist. And I get it. There's systemic racism and voter,
but yeah,
you
but
know,
that's that term systemic racism, which is another kind of buzz term.
yeah,
That's supposed to encompass the entire
exactly,
country,
right.
right?
So
Yeah.
this is what I'm saying. So the films have often will use a shorthand. The Southerner is a racist. In Jerry Maguire, Beau Bridges like is the Texas guy with the accent, and he screws over Jerry Maguire because Jerry Maguire is walking with Cuba Gooding Jr., right? And it's because he's a racist. He's also like untrustworthy, and he's both of those things because he's from Texas or wherever, right? And so like, and this happens all the time. Movies will use the South as a shorthand for racism, and I'm like, whoa, right? The South. So like, yes, there's tons of racism in the South, but good God, look around. Like, our whole country is crazy, and in Minnesota, like there's like racial violence everywhere, and so that's a disservice because it lets the country off the hook. I really believe this, right? Like, our childhoods, we're the same age, our childhoods, right? The South was like racist. That wasn't the only thing it was, but the South was racist and the rest of the country was relatively enlightened. And like, that's, except for a few exceptions, that's madness. And so that would be like great harm because it lets us off the hook. It lets us not, we don't have to like people in Illinois or Oregon, California. I mean, Chester Himes, right? Black crime writer from Mississippi. He said he didn't have a problem with white people till he tried to work in the movies. And he like the way he was treated out there, he was like, that like the racism he met there in the 40s was just, it wasn't as maybe as overtly violent, but it was just as bad. And so like that, like that's where the South, it's not that the South gets a bad rap, but like it's used as a scapegoat for the country's racial sins. And that's crazy. It's like we're all implicated. I mean, the whole country was involved. Um, sorry, I think I was ranting there.
No, and that's fine. I mean, and that's, towards the end of the book, it does get, I think, more political, kind of soapboxy, but and that's something I wanted to touch on, because while I was reading it, we might have some points of disagreement about the severity of certain, issues.
Sure.
But I was wondering if there was any concern on your part of, say, someone from the South who's a big movie buff,
Yeah.
maybe even a Trump supporter,
Sure.
or even someone from since we're
Yeah,
putting everything on an equal footing,
whatever. Yeah.
someone from Illinois who's a Trump supporter,
Yeah.
picking up this book. I love movies. Oh, it's a book about the South and
Right.
film. Getting up to certain points of it and being like, I feel like I'm being attacked.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think I have like some sense of humor about it, and I know okay, the 2000s for me, I was like a libertarian, dedicated libertarian, pretty hard far right guy.
Well, far I just want to make sure we get our terms here, because far right is like Nazis.
No,
there's conservatives and there's far right.
This was before you had the like far right and white
You weren't carrying
supremacy.
tiki torches and things.
No, nothing like that. Right. I was just kind of like, I remember the government's job was to protect property and prevent plunder, and that's it. So I wasn't a Nazi. I wasn't like, no, I didn't. I was the same guy, but I had this ideology, right? Okay. So, and now why is this in the book? A couple things. One, my personal political and I would say spiritual, philosophical and aesthetic like development is connected inextricably to cinema. Now, novels played a huge part too, reading history, but cinema is like, it's key to me. And so I like film writing that connects the personal to like what the movies are doing to us. And I just like that, right? So I didn't mean to be on the soapbox when you're reading it, but the 2000s for me were a very important time. It's very painful because I was like Bush guy, libertarian Bush fan, up until we started to invade Iraq. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, why are we doing this? And I kept thinking,
you had a good couple of years there. So
before
you fell out of love. Yeah.
Well, I didn't think we should invade Afghanistan either, because I was like, we're never going to get out of there. Right. I was the only one saying this with my friends and stuff. I was like, that's the destroyer of empires. We're going to get there and we're never going to be able to leave. But yeah, so I'm like, the lead up to Iraq, I was like, oh my God, we're doing this because we can. And so the films that came out in the Bush era are very important to me and evocative to me, but they're part of this development in my own sort of thinking about what government is, right? What art is. And I mean, I'm not some windbag that's only going to bloviate about like left-wing stuff at parties, but I mean, it is part of who I am, right? And I don't want to hide that when I'm talking about the movies, right? So the 2000s were a weird time for cinema because you had reality and its double. You had a number of examples of the docudrama was like a big deal. And there were a lot of great films, but the docudrama like really kind of came back, roaring back in that era. You had Stephen Colbert, who was a fictional character interacting with reality on a daily or weekly basis. And then you also had Borat.
I was just going to say Sacha Baron Cohen doing that too.
Fictional character interacting with real people, and it's like a semi-fictional interaction because they had like set up the terms sort of, but they thought they were dealing with, so that was a really fascinating time. And that chapter was 70 pages in the first draft because I went through everything, every movie. I mean, it was just ridiculous. The editor was like, "What are you doing?" And most of it wasn't about the South, right? But to kind of pull back to the South, right? That era gave us There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, which both films are directly and indirectly about U.S. interventions in Iraq. Now, I mean, you can only take that so far, but especially No Country for Old Men. Like that movie is about like violence uncontained, like violence having no end. You can't like, you know.
Did you, brief side note, did you ever read the Cormac McCarthy
Oh
novel?
yeah, I've read all. I'm a huge fan. I've read all his books. I
Oh,
love him.
I
No,
think
I read Blood Meridian. I say that because I try to reread Blood Meridian every like other year.
I got to read that. I only read No Country for Old Men and then on the Road,
The
right?
Road. Well,
Um,
The Road is like really weird, a weird book for him, by the way.
well, what I loved about the novel for No Country is that because I'm a huge fan of the movie. I
Oh,
saw it a number of times in the theater, and then I read the book, and I felt like this is one of those rare cases where the novel is almost like the director's cut of the
it
film.
is. No, it is.
It doesn't change the movie; it only enhances your
Yeah,
understanding of it.
yeah,
You know, yeah.
because it's all in his mind. Tommy Lee Jones's the book is happening inside his memory and mind. That's the difference, right? So like uh, that how much time has passed from when this happened to when he's thinking about it is like a big part. Where in the movie they very cleverly put his interior monologues in his like talking and stuff. No, I adore that film. Weirdly, when I first saw it, when I left, I was like, it's really well filmed. But I mean, I was crazy. You know, I don't know why it didn't resonate with me. Uh, no, I love it. I mean, yeah. So anyway, to finish, I don't want to preach to people. If someone's offended, if someone's first off, I was writing novels and like they're not bad, and some of them I think are really good, but I just couldn't. I don't know I just couldn't make any headway. I wasn't. I felt like I was hitting my head against these invisible kind of obstacles. So I'm trying to write nonfiction. I like this is but I wanted to have some of the feel of a novel and that there's surprises in it and
Hmm.
that it unfolds, right? So I put myself in the book in part to give it. It's not just like lists or chronological. I want it to feel like it has digressions and side roads and even dead ends, right? I want it to have surprises. So my own, it's not this wasn't narcissism or solipsism to do this. I mean, I was trying to make it like a fun book to read, kind of.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah,
it is, but I'm just thinking of just kind of perspectives. Like
I
if so,
don't
there's
care
someone,
if it. I don't care if it offends somebody,
yeah.
and I don't want the writers that I read to care if they offend me at
Mhm.
all. And I had one review. One review said I was cursing in it and had something about like a limited academic vocabulary, right?
What?
Yeah, no, I don't read reviews. My wife read this to me, and I was like, "Oh, I delight in that. That's like I should put that on the front of the book, right? Like uh, that's someone who they're not getting what they want. But I don't read books to get what I want, right? I like want surprises and enigma and I don't know.
Sure.
So I don't care. And honestly, if someone's like, oh, this guy sucks, right? This guy's a terrible writer and he sucks and he's a left wing crazy guy. I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe you
Well,
write a book. I mean, I read right wing. That's not exactly the right term, but I read like religious movie books for the research for this. I read um, a number of conservative. I've read a lot of conservative writers over the years, and I don't agree with them, but I
that's
don't know.
fair.
Yeah,
Now, let's talk about, well, first of all, talking about your novels, you do tease one that I liked towards the end of the book, you were talking about how initially, or at some point in the development, you had wanted to start the book with Birth of a Nation
Yeah.
and
Birth
end
of a
it
Nation to Birth of a Nation.
with Nate
Yeah.
Parker's Birth of
Yeah.
a Nation. Didn't quite work out that way because I think, as you put it, the movies just kept coming and there was more stuff to talk about and write about.
And I didn't get it done in time, right? Like, you can't, a book coming out in 2020 can't end with a movie that came out in 2015 or whatever. I
Right.
don't remember when it came out.
Yeah, it was like 2015 or 16, I think.
Yeah.
But no, you mentioned a novel or an idea for a novel that you had that was based on the Nat Turner story.
I wrote
And
it. I wrote it. It's
it
called The Doctrine of uh, Last Things. It's a wild and kind of terrible book, but
well, that's the thing, is I don't know if you could put it out, because like just looking at the premise, like that is a dangerous premise, but it also sounds fascinating.
yeah.
And I
So
won't
I'll tell you
spoil it.
the print.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know. I think we should leave people to
Yeah.
discover that for themselves.
The thing is, I would describe this to people, and then I'm like, wait, you're. I try not to talk about the books I'm working on, but I would describe this to people, and they'd be, that's like a crazy idea. And one friend was like, that's like a great, like, that's great. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. Anyway, like 2 people have read that in the world. I mean, that's deep in a vault.
But I do want to talk about well, first of all, have you seen, I haven't even seen the trailer for this, but I'm going to be watching it at some point soon. Hillbilly Elegy. It's coming out in theaters. Actually,
Advance. It's the like nonfiction, right? Like, it's an
no,
adaptation.
it's fiction. It's Amy Adams and Glenn Close.
But is it? Oh, it has nothing to do with. I thought Hillbilly Elegy was like that nonfiction book that the guy from Ohio wrote, or am I like thinking of another book?
I don't know. That's the thing, is it's all, well, by the time this episode drops, the movie will have been out
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
few
Okay,
weeks,
no, I
right?
haven't seen the trailer for it. No, I mean, are you talking about like, were you going to segue to like movies right now that have come out?
Yeah, where do you see kind of and it's weird to talk about a movie that neither of us have seen, but for right now, it's like pre-release. It's got a tomato meter rating of like 23%, and people are saying it's the next Green Book, which is kind of
Well,
the movie I wanted to end on. So I'm
okay,
just wondering, like,
yes.
yeah.
So, okay, Green Book. All right, I thought Green Book had great costumes, which is okay. I know. I thought it had great lighting. I thought it had a really good performance from the 2 leads. Honestly, I thought they were like really good in it. And its heart is in the right place. It tells the story of a Black artist struggling to like make it in across the South, right? And it has, in some sense, it's a pretty standard, well-made, like Hollywood buddy movie with some racial reconciliation and understanding in it, right? It has 1 or 2 scenes that like fall so flat. That's what people, like, I feel like, are responding to. The first scene is when Viggo Mortensen's character teaches Ali's character about the real Black, like, America. So he's like listening to soul music and eating fried chicken with his hands, and it just doesn't. A, the real guy supposedly wasn't like that, and B, it just doesn't, like, it's such a tone deaf note, right?
And that's because I'm a personal fan of Green Book. I
I
went
liked
to,
it fine. I thought it
well,
was
no,
okay.
no,
Yeah.
here's the thing. When it won Best Picture, all of my colleagues, all my friends were like up in arms. They're like, this is offensive. This is wrong. And I was like, I am not mad that it won Best Picture.
I thought
You
it
know,
was going to. I thought it was like it's the kind of movie that Hollywood likes. Because it is self-congratulatory of itself. I mean, that's a double. I mean, it, like, the movie knows that its heart is in the right place.
right.
So
And that's sort of why, not let it off the hook. Like you, I think I appreciate aesthetically. I liked all of this stuff about it. It's just that I think, personally, I think it all came together in a piece that, let's just say, if this had come out in 1989, if this was the movie
it would
that
have been,
Driving Miss Daisy, if that had
sure.
been swapped places, no one would have said anything about it.
No.
Now, as far as
So
that scene that you're talking about, with
yeah,
Mahershala Ali's character sort of being schooled in
yeah.
Black culture, that didn't bother me. Now, whether or not that's a representation of the actual guy's life,
Yeah,
if that was
doesn't
a
matter.
made up thing, yeah, it doesn't quite matter because you can't find truth in any historical movie. It's
Sure.
all bent and put through the
Yeah.
sausage factory. But you know, I am sure that there are people out there who are not quote unquote in touch with the roots and culture
Sure.
of the people they are supposed to identify with. And there are people that are from opposite cultures who are more in tune with that. So learning lessons from wherever they come from, I can understand how that ruffles feathers. I just, when I look at that, I'm like, that is the height of kind of like PC watchdogging. I'm like, just chill out.
Yeah. Well, I actually agree in the sense that like I do not want filmmakers to be sitting there going like, oh, I just don't want to offend anybody, right? But like I said, it's a fine line because I don't want to contribute to the marginalization of anybody. So it's like a tough one. But let me just say the other false note is they get pulled over in the South, and it's like they get beat up and they get put in prison, and then they get pulled over near the end of the film, and they're like just north of the Mason-Dixon line. And the cop comes up and the guy's like, "Hey, fellas, can I help you guys get?" And I was like, "You understand? Northern cops are like shooting black people at like all over the place right now, like when they're making the film." And so that was like a fault to me. That was like a weird. I don't know if it's the movie's fault. I understand what it's doing, right? But like that just really stuck with me. And I'm not like, man, the South has to be shown on screen with some dignity. I just kind of like, well, that's crazy, right? Like they're in Indiana and the cops are like enlightened. I don't know.
Well, maybe. I mean, but that's the thing is
Maybe.
like, I also don't think that to what you were saying, I don't think filmmakers should check in with the news, when
No,
they're
I
trying to
agree.
be creative and say, well, we can't do that because, 2 weeks ago someone, got shot. And I'm not trying to downplay that. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
we're always going to be in a climate where someone can find fault with a
Yeah.
piece of dramatic license.
No, I mean, I'm not, I don't, I'm more interested in the fact that Green Book got that people were surprised that it won than I am. I mean, to me it's fluffy. It's a regular like a regular Hollywood movie. Like this is kind of what I expect Hollywood movies to be when they're like about a former era.
Well, and I think that's one of the keys to its success and why people responded to it and kind of made it a hit is it is a movie about race relations that feels like the kinds of movies about race relations that were made 30 years ago,
Sure.
like A Driving Miss Daisy. And it's almost like a foreign feeling to say, well, okay, we're going to have a movie about black and white relations that has an optimistic tone to it despite the hardships.
Yeah.
You had a lot of and you talked about this in the film, the resurgence of the slave movie in the last 2 years with 12 Years a Slave and also with Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
Those are also, well, Birth of a Nation I think got kind of scrubbed because of the personal issues with the
There was
director.
a backstory, and
Right.
it also, I mean, when you see 12 Years a Slave, you realize how difficult it is. I mean, it's a really well made film that I never want to watch again. And I think like I would probably watch the second Birth of a Nation, the Parker Birth of a Nation again before I watch. It was also brutal,
Yeah,
but
and
12 Years a Slave is so powerful. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just it's so powerful and it sticks. It's so well made and the actors are so good. It like it's not. It's a very unpleasant movie in a lot of ways.
two things. One, I love the way that in the book you describe uh, the Nate Parker film Birth of a Nation as a slave movie that's also a horror movie.
Yeah,
And you re-illustrated that point about the white girl and the black girl like playing, and
very
that as that
powerful
focuses
scene.
in, you realize that you think they're just running around kind of chasing each other, and
Sure,
you realize that there's a rope around the black girl's neck.
a very
I'd
powerful
forgotten
scene.
about that.
Like
Yeah, but it's
brilliant, brilliant. Yeah,
yeah. And 12 Years a Slave, I do want to see that movie again at some point, but because I was a big fan of it, which sounds
it's
weird to say about
no,
a
it's a
movie like
great
that.
no, it's a
Um,
great film. I mean, I am too. It was, he's a great director.
yeah, I saw it once, and the reason I want to see it again, but I don't feel like I need to, is because it's so seared into me that just saying the name 12 Years a Slave, like it almost starts playing again in my head. I saw it once in a theater for like an awards screening. I'm like, it's still there.
Yeah. For me, I watched, it was one of the last movies I watched for the book. I watched it 8 months ago or something, 6 months ago. And I've been holding off. I've never seen Schindler's List either. I try to
Still?
avoid, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I try to avoid, uh, if I know something's well made, but it's documenting some like just horrible atrocity or cruelty, it's hard for me to gear up and be like, oh, it's Friday night. I'm just going to throw on a little Schindler's List. Double feature with Shoah and Schindler's List, or, you know, or like, so 12 Years a Slave. It's a great film and it's paced really well and the acting's great. And it doesn't harbor, I mean, it doesn't like, because it's paced really well, it doesn't feel like homework or medicine, right? Because it's really well made. It's just, you know, it's a clever film because every character in the movie who's put into slavery, every human who's put into slavery experienced the torment and torture of this guy. But the film, because you see his life beforehand, and he's got like a rich life, the family in New York City, it like cleverly makes you feel extra suffering. And so it is a fresh, it's almost like you're seeing slavery from the inside and the outside at the same time. So it's a very clever a way to do it, but it's so hard to experience it with this guy. And the lead actor, and I've never been able to fully. He's one of my favorite actors.
It's Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Ejiofor. He's so good, right? And so good at it conveying with his face, like what he's experiencing, that the film is. I mean, it's one in a million, but you know, I would. I mean, maybe when my kids are older, I'll watch it with them. But yeah,
Hey, to lighten things up, did you
yeah,
ever see Serenity, the movie they made up based on Joss Whedon's
I
Firefly?
did. Yeah,
That was the first time I think I'd ever seen
and
Chiwetel
he's
Ejiofor.
amazing in it. He's
He
so good in
is.
it. Yeah,
He's like the best villain.
he has
He's
5 minutes. He's barely in the movie, or like he's in it for a short amount of time, really. But he's so good.
yeah,
I saw him. I remember in the preview, and I was like, "Who's this guy?"
yeah.
I liked him in Dirty Pretty Things, where he plays a Nigerian taxi driver in England who chews the stuff like caffeine leaves to stay awake, and he finds
I
a
don't think I've
heart.
seen that.
So he also works in a hotel, and he finds a heart in a toilet when he's like cleaning. Yeah, so he has these two like. So there's like a mystery. It's great. It's like it's about like immigrants in England, but it's also like there's this mystery, like what's going on. And there's a gangster, and like how did this heart end up in this toilet? It's really good, but he's amazing in it. He was probably 25, and he looks 40. I mean, I think he's younger. I think he's younger than we are, or he's like our age. He's
I,
not. I mean, you know.
I think you're right about that. I think I looked him up at one point, like how old he was, and I'm like, God damn, we're like contemporaries.
Yeah,
But
I've done more. I've had more. No, I'm kidding. He's uh, he's something else. Yeah, but
oh, so yeah, I think Green Book. I brought up the Hillbilly Elegy thing because again, I haven't seen the trailer for it. I just saw the poster. It looks like it's Amy Adams and Glenn Close. Maybe it's a serious drama, that I can actually sit down and watch. But when I first saw the poster, I'm like, oh, this is a comedy about like cartoon characters.
yeah, the Cold Mountain to me, which had some good sequences, but Renee Zellweger, her performance in that is just so over the top with the like fake Southern accent, and she's like, uh, everything's just so. Yeah. Anyway, I know what you're talking. Like, so yeah, that Hillbilly. Okay, I'll have to watch the preview. I mean, I tried to include. I have Mudbound, Just Mercy, which was Just Mercy. I thought was great. I wasn't expecting much from it, but I thought it was really good.
Yeah, me too.
And I end with Mindhunter season 2, Atlanta, the TV show, Baby Driver, 999, because it's all like Atlanta kind of, and then the last movie I talk about is the Free State of Jones, which to me was like the the rejoinder to a lot of the movies I watched in my youth. It's sort of like it's about all the characters at Gone with the Wind. Like if you shook Gone with the Wind and like all the characters that you don't see kind of fell out, it's about them, and also a great film. And I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting it to be as powerful and as well made as it was when I saw the posters and stuff.
Well, and that is, I think I hinted out at this earlier or touched on it, but one of the things I really dig about the book is when you write about films that I haven't seen, and Free State of Jones is one. I was like, oh, that's right, that was a Matthew McConaughey movie from a few years ago. I remember seeing the poster, and the only other thing I remember is that it like did no business, like nobody went to see it.
Yeah.
But the way that you talk about it and describe it and the significance that you place on it in this historical context that you're building, I'm like, I have to go watch this movie now.
Did you watch it?
No, I don't have time to.
All right. Well, let me say. I mean,
I
no,
put it
but
on
to
my list
me,
to watch at some
yeah,
point in the
to
future.
me, it's a very powerful. First of all, it's a really well-made film, and it's not like a white savior film. That was some critics. Like, some people saw the poster and like, oh, another like white guy. It's not really like that. It's a colony who declared themselves a free state, and they were biracial. And they were in, I want to say Alabama, and they were basically like, the Civil War is not our problem. We are our labor. We own ourselves, right? And we are independent. And it follows them through the war, and then afterwards, when the South reasserts itself at the end of Reconstruction. And it's really painful to watch. It's sort of like 12 Years a Slave. All these characters who have been kind of progressing and building lives for themselves, the empire strikes back. And it's like really tough. I'm not going to give anything away, but like it's a very well-made film. And it's lush. It's filmed in like swamps and forests and stuff. But to me, it's the bookend, right? Like if you start with Birth of a Nation and go to Free State of Jones, they are in direct communication. And I'm giving away the end of the book.
But that doesn't mean it's not worth reading.
There's some more stuff. Yeah.
There's a ton of stuff that we could have done a 6-hour show about everything that's in this book, but then there wouldn't be anything left to read.
Sure.
So I would like to thank you very much for coming in and talking with me about this. This is not going to be our last film conversation by any stretch.
Oh, I hope not. I hope you have me back for something.
Yes, I think I want to go through the checklist I started making on some of these movies that are on my bucket list, and maybe just you can guide me through them.
I would love that.
All right. Probably not Song of the South.
Yeah. Right. I say in the book, don't expect a remake.
Oh my God. That'll be when Disney scrapes the entire bucket, the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But yeah, okay. Ben Beard, the book is out December 15th, which
Yes.
we're, just for full disclosure, we're just recording this in like mid-November. So about a month from now, a month from then. Yeah.
No, whenever you put it out. The thing is, I have a radio interview tomorrow. I have another radio interview next week. I wasn't expecting this stuff to happen, but I'm like trying to, but yeah, it's you can get it anywhere. December 15th.
Cool. Well, I'm going to put this out in conjunction with the book. So in December, but I will be promoting the hell out of it leading up to that. So on the podcast. Ian. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Congratulations on a book well put together and put out. Yeah. What do you think your next thing's going to be? I know you're in the midst of promoting this and thinking about it, but what's next?
30,000 words. I have a contract for it. I'm writing a biography of Joseph H. Lewis, who made Gun Crazy. And The Big Combo, and he was a B director, and it's much easier than this book. Everyone's dead. Everyone's been dead a long time, so there's some research and stuff, but I'm writing that, and I'm enjoying it. And then I told you I had this book about American fiction that I hope I haven't shopped it around or tried to find an agent or anything, but I hope to do that I'm hoping to next year. I'm hoping to have more than one book come out, or like in the next year and a half.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, we'll be talking about those for sure. But
Thanks, Ian.
yeah, in the meantime, congrats again. Thanks again. And yeah, we'll talk about something real soon.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Thanks for having me and for your time and generosity.
Of course, man. Have a great night.
You too.
All right. Bye.